Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us for a powerful and necessary conversation. Today, we're shining a light on a topic that's too often overlooked: substance use, employment barriers, and the role of social determinants, of health among non-custodial fathers in the child support system. Now, this isn't just research. It's a reflection of lived experiences. It's about real fathers navigating systems that often create roadblocks instead of bridges. As the moderator and someone deeply invested in the well being of families, I'm honored to guide this discussion. We'll be diving into the heart of this study, its purpose, process, and powerful findings. But more importantly, we'll unpack the larger systems like poverty, criminal records, addiction, and inequitable policies that shape whether fathers can truly show up for their kids, not just with money, but with presence, love, and support. So let's lean into this discussion, listen with open hearts, and allow this conversation to stretch your understanding and maybe help you make some changes. So with that said, let me introduce myself and my incredible panel. My name is Grace, and I am the Vice President of Grace SMAR. Mr. Walton.
Thank you, Grace, and thank you for inviting me. I'm Keva Walton, CEO of Mecklenburg County ABC Board.
Thank you.
And I am Dr. LaDrea Ingram. I am a research faculty member at Yale University and also a consultant here in the Mecklenburg County community.
Awesome.
Hello, my name is Kenny Smith. I'm the president and co-founder of Grace Small Services, Inc.
Thank you. Thank you guys for coming. I'm really looking forward to this discussion because just reading the research, the impact it had on me. So I'm looking forward to hearing what you guys all have to say. So let's get right to it. So this first question, I'm going to direct it to Mr. Smith and Dr. Ingram.
Okay.
So what brought you to this project, and why was it important for you to be involved in this research?
Well, the Fatherhood program really launched in 2019 here in Mecklenburg County. We were fortunate enough to be the organization that created the software for the initial launch of the program. Subsequently, we were allowed to take over the day-to-day operation of the program in 2021. But we had to do this type of work with really looking at what took place and what happened so that we could make our adjustments, because the program was new. No one had ever looked at, well, did we create it properly? Yeah. Is it achieving the goals and objectives that we wanted? Absolutely. So it just was time for us just to take a deeper dive and understand, what really happened through the course of the first 5 years of this program.
Awesome. Thank you. Dr. Ingram.
And I think the beauty of this project is being able to join forces with an existing rooted organization that was already empowering fathers, already refining fathers, already really in the community doing the work. And so I was able to just be a bridge, like you said earlier, to be able to use my expertise in the community. And so me coming in and recognizing as a researcher, a data scientist, is that data provides information, and with information, you're able to do something with it. And Kenny, the Grace Mar team, had the information. Now, how are we going to use that information to be able to explore and understand what is really happening with fathers? Because there has historically been this narrative that, particularly African-American fathers are not in the home. Right. They're not there, they're not present, and, not necessarily the greatest narrative out there. Right. And I genuinely believe, I think as an African-American researcher or scientist, I understand what are some of those backdoor things that could be happening that doesn't allow them to show up properly. Absolutely. And I think that lived experience also allows you to look into the data differently, to see what is happening behind the scenes and explore it differently. And so that is what this project is like, how do we recognize that we understand the data, we understand that We see a lot of non-custodial fathers in the home. We see that African American women, for the most part, are oftentimes in single-family homes, parenting. So what is happening? What is the narrative behind that? Right. And I genuinely believe, as someone who's African American woman, that fathers want to be present.
Absolutely.
I believe that the majority of fathers want to be available, emotionally accessible, financially, but there's something happening. And so this project allowed us to uncover what was happening.
Excellent. Thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah, because too many times we pass judgment and we don't have an understanding. So thank you so much for that. Mr. Walton, so why did the Mecklenburg County ABC Board choose to fund this particular study? And what makes this population an issue or a priority?
Yeah. Boy, I got a lot on that one.
Oh, good.
But first and foremost, let me say kudos to Grace Marr and you as a researcher. I mean, data is king and queen, I believe, in this day and age. And like any good business, as an example, we had a market analysis done on our market because post-COVID, everything changed.
Absolutely.
And we always need to understand the business case, right? And so you can't get that without data.
Absolutely.
And particularly when it comes to substance misuse, and we realize that it's not just the substance, it's all of the connected pieces that are illustrated so beautifully in this research. And so for us, we're not programmers. I'd like to think of us as catalysts,
Right.
and that we can jumpstart some of this work, or the more work, because there's some great work being done at the grassroots. So it was important for that reason. Let's dig a little deeper. We know that substance misuse is out there, but how is it showing up and where?
Right.
And on a, not to be too philosophical about it, but I have this deep belief that if we aren't well as citizens, we can't be successful as a city, as a county, as a community, no matter which population you're in. And so, these are long-standing issues that we dealing with. The human condition is not predictable.
Very true.
And there's good reasoning and logic. And to hear the voices of the folks in this study are evident of that. But again, to be a catalyst, to help uncover and go a little deeper in understanding of what is the challenge. So hopefully we become smarter about how we deal with the challenge.
Absolutely.
And deal in a holistic way.
Right. Thank you. Thank you so much. Kenny, this one's for you. What patterns were you seeing in the community that signaled, a need for a deeper investigation?
Great question. I don't think you prepped me for this question.
No.
Okay. All the patterns were anecdotal, right? So we were hearing stories.
Right.
And, nothing wrong with stories.
Right.
But when you're talking to people like Dr. Ingram and Keva, they love stories. We're like, give me some proof, right? I'll go back to my corporate days when I was at General Electric and American Express and all these different places. We didn't make decisions without data.
Come on.
Right? You couldn't come to the table. So I heard this. Well, where's the data? So that's just the stance that we took. So we heard the stories, and there's some other questions that I'll expand on. But we heard the stories of how there were barriers financially. We heard stories of guys talking about, well, I just tuned out and I went and just got a bottle. We start hearing these stories. We looked at some of the surface level data, and some of the things that started emerging where you started seeing fathers say things like, I was a little lonely. So it was really the anecdotal stories that forced us to say, hey, we
There's
just
more
need
to
to
this.
dig. Yeah, we need to dig deeper. Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Dr. Ingram, this question's for you. What surprised you most from the listening sessions with the non-custodial fathers?
Wow. So I will say, to piggyback off of what Kenny was saying, because I often say, teaching evidence-based decision-making in public health practice is that a lot of people say the data doesn't lie. But what can lie is the perceptions of how you interpret and understand the data.
Wow.
And so you could have a perception, a judgment. You can begin to reason as to what you think something is. But if you don't listen to learn, right? And so at those listening sessions, why they're so important and critical to this work is because you have to allow the community and the individuals that you're seeking to learn from, you have to be humble enough to allow them to say, this is what we found in the data.
Right.
This is what it's telling us. Now tell us what it's telling you.
Exactly.
Tell us what it's telling you. And what I heard in that listening session is, I want to be present,
Right. Right.
but I also need to bring in income
right.
because what provider means is fiscal,
Right.
but I'm trying to balance the conflict between what's fiscally important, right? The economic component of fatherhood with being present emotionally,
Right.
with being present in the home physically. And so, not that it was necessarily surprising, but it gives you that peek into the door of the heart of the individual that goes well beyond what that structured data can tell you. Those closed-in, open surveys can tell you.
Right.
Those,
Right.
those structured, data points that we get from survey outcomes where someone answers the questions. But there's nothing like hearing the voice of the heart of the individuals that's telling you, yeah, that may be true, but here's why. This is what's happening.
That's right.
And so I'm not a father, I'm a mother, but to hear, it went beyond just listening. It was really hearing
Right.
with
Right.
my research lens, but also being reflective
heart,
with
yes.
my heart and hearing the genuine desire, but yet conflict of society tells me, right, even in the court system, that in order for me to show up, what it means to show up as a father
Right.
is to be a fiscal fiduciary
That's right.
of the home, right? But one of the fathers said, but in order for me to do that, I spend a lot of days
Right.
out of the home. And so then it begins to really help you define and understand what a fatherhood identity is. What does it mean? How are they experiencing fatherhood? And you could be present physically in the home, but be very absent.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And the burden, I mean, the genuine burden
Yeah.
of being able to understand and delve into that role and go beyond what society says fatherhood should be. Or the fathers who are just like, I am not able to pay child support,
Right.
but I want to be present. But when my child, when the mother wants me to come pick them up, they're asking me, what am I doing? What am I going to get them? How am I going to feed? And they are experiencing an extraordinary amount of responsibility to be able to show up. And so I think what I was listening to was the heart of a father
Right.
that is connected to the identity of a father. And that is what a closed-ended survey could never tell you,
Absolutely.
but a voice of a father can.
Absolutely. How important it is to listen to the voice, to listen to what people are saying. And Kenny, this next question is for you. Can you describe a story or example from the program that really stuck out with you? And before you answer that question, as I was listening to Dr. Ingram talking about listening to the voices of the people, listening to what they're saying, because a lot of times we say we listen, but it just goes in one ear and out the other because there's no solution, there's nothing to combat that, right? And so before we started this, I asked Kenny what he had a Band-Aid on his ear. I asked him what happened, and he said he was going to share the story. And I said, "Oh, it's not gonna make. You don't need to share the story in this conversation." But when he shared the story, I realized the connection. So I'm going to have you share that story when we talk about listening to what people are telling us.
Okay, so
And
you
that's
want me?
interesting because his ear.
His ear, right?
So wait a minute.
That's right.
Yeah. So wait a minute.
Of listening.
So is this the story about fatherhood, or do I tell the dog story?
Well, I think it ties in because the dog story, because you didn't listen to what your dog was saying,
right. That's
you
right.
got bit, right?
Yes.
And with the fatherhood story, a lot of times we don't listen to our men, right? And I hate to say, Black men oftentimes are overlooked and their voices aren't heard because of the stereotypes that people have about them and who they are. So they don't listen to them, right? So, and I know people love animals, right? So this is a great segue into that.
Okay,
You know.
so that I don't hog all the time.
No.
I will say this, 90% of the fathers that were in this study happen to be African American. But I will say, I believe that non-custodial fathers, period,
Right.
can be painted with a lot of this. So I just want to make sure that that's understood, because we are literally looking at, non-custodial fathers of any race
Yeah.
are still have biases that they have to overcome. So I want to make that quick point. So a story that sticks out with me with the fathers, and then I'll get into the dog story, is that when we did the Christmas party in 2023, a gentleman was there, and we got him on camera, and he just basically told a story. He says, I never have been a part of a program where when I just mentioned that I was doing this, that I would get a job. And so his story was he was at court. We had an advocate there. The court referred him to the program. The advocate brought him back to the office and says, hey, we're going to help you find work. And he says, well, I have an interview tomorrow with such and such. And my son, Kenny Jr., happened to be the recruiter. He said, oh, I know them. We have 300 employees, by the way, that we work with in Mecklenburg County, just so y'all know. Shameless plug. But he calls the recruiter up, lets him know, hey, our gentleman's coming in tomorrow for an interview.
Yeah.
He says, okay, tell him to bring his ID and his social security card with him. That's okay. No interview, right on the spot, hired.
Wow.
That's what social capital does.
Absolutely.
So we listened to what that gentleman wanted, and we were able to help him. Now, I got to tell the dog story quick and fast. But the long story short, my dog, we thought was dying, and he was motionless. This was a behavior he had never exhibited. We thought he was dying. He's 8 years old. And so my kids wanted to sleep outside with him that night. This was going to be his last night. He wanted to be with them. So, human being, owner, alpha male, dog's laying there. Kenny, I'm hurt. Leave me alone. Just leave me here. Because he's not moving. He's not going for bacon. He's not doing anything. He's just not moving. I said, no, boys, y'all putting the tent over there. I'm going to carry my dog over to the tent. 130-pound Connie Corso. It just would be like if Dr. Ingram's arm was broken and she told me her arm was broken, but her voice, his voice was, I'm not moving. That's his voice. And I looked and I said, oh, let me see if I can move it. What would you do?
You would resist.
You would, punch me or stop.
Right. Yeah.
That was his way of responding. Hey,
Yeah.
I told you I was hurt.
That's right.
And I think that what Grace is trying to draw is that oftentimes in the listening session, there was no buffer, there was no filter. This is what we want, this is what we need.
Right.
Are we going to listen?
Right.
That's the question. Are we going to listen?
Yeah.
When my dog is laying there motionless again, am I going to move him?
Absolutely
No.
not. Yep.
So my question is, and when you're talking about the listening session,
Yeah.
are we going to listen to those fathers? They talked about needing a support group. They talked about being lonely. They talked about, I cope using alcohol and drugs.
Yeah.
These are the things that they said. So are we going to listen to them and try to put things together based on what they're saying and not what we think as owners
Right.
think they
Absolutely.
need?
And I love that you said that, because ownership is a critical component to community-based work.
Absolutely.
And where the leverage and the autonomy is
Right.
oftentimes in owners that may be organizations or
Right.
city leaders or
Absolutely.
policy
Right.
leaders. And the ownership isn't necessarily, or the agency for efforts is not
Right.
necessarily in the hands
Right.
of the community. And by listening, you're giving them their agency and their ownership back.
Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. And in a society where we have a lot of our programs for women, the men oftentimes get neglected and therefore their voice is never heard, right? So thank you for that. Thank you guys. So Mr. Walton, this question's for you. As a community leader, what emotions or insights struck you when reading the findings or hearing the participants' voices?
Wow, there's so much. Again, it's such a rich study, and congrats on it. You know, there's so many. One of the things that I thought was the complexity of it. And for anyone who has a belief about a non-custodial father,
Right.
whatever they be, it's not as simple as your misperception.
Right. Exactly.
It is interconnected, and this is the case for underserved communities in general. You can't solve one. And that's for us as a board that funds this work and others doing this great work. We realized years ago that it's not just the substance abuse, and that's why we renamed it the Wellness Grant.
Right.
Because wellness is certainly, it's mental, it's physical, it's spiritual, it's the whole person.
That's right.
And so, again, the complexity of it, there is no simple answer, but there is a way forward. I feel we are so fortunate in Charlotte-Mecklenburg. We have so many resources.
We do.
I've worked in counties where there are fewer resources. The challenge is, and I might be jumping ahead a little bit, is we don't often align.
That's
There's
huge.
misalignment.
That's it. Yes.
And so,
yes.
you know, I guess the other thing that I recognize is the opportunity to align these resources. The work that Grace Mar has done is sitting right there, people. So how do we build onto it?
That's right.
Not recreate the wheel, but build onto it.
Right.
And the other thing that I found interesting, honestly, was you had education is powerful, but you had men in there with bachelor's degrees. And then the age, you know, you had some men in there past 30.
Yeah.
You had seniors.
Yeah.
You had grandfathers.
So, you know, which says this isn't just a young thing or an
Right.
educated thing,
That's right.
which points to the systemic nature of
Absolutely.
the issues that you're dealing with here. So those were two biggies for me.
Yeah. And those were big.
Yeah.
Those are big ones.
Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you. Dr. Ingram, the report describes substance use as both a coping mechanism and a barrier. So, can you unpack that dynamic for us?
Yes. And so I think it's important because in my field, right, I'm both a researcher, but I'm a clinical scientist. So I'm licensed in clinical mental health counseling and licensed in addiction. And a certified alcohol drug counselor. So I think it's important to first unpack, right, the clinical component of it. And so sometimes substance abuse is used as what we call in our field maladaptive coping. It's a form of coping, whether it's healthy or not. And then there's what we call adaptive coping, which is coping that is healthier coping. And so sometimes individuals do not have proper coping strategies. And so they are just trying to find a resource or a mechanism to help them deal with some of the things that we talk about. And I believe that there's a beauty in fatherhood, but like what we've recognized and like you've talked about, there is these conflicting internal struggles that a father is experiencing just by the nature of their identity.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And so in the listening session, there was one father was just like, I'm okay with using,
Yeah.
marijuana.
Yeah.
It there's nothing wrong with it. And there was this interesting dialogue between the fathers in regards to that. And I always say in regards to substance abuse, like, what is your relationship with the substance? right? If the substance is avoidance,
Right.
at the end of the day,
That's it.
when you get done, or that high is down,
down.
or you're no longer experiencing the residual impact of the substance use, guess what? You still got to go back to that
Absolutely.
reality.
Absolutely.
Right? And so I think that is what's really important is, for one, to understand, right, what is your relationship with the substance. And that is oftentimes one of the biggest things that individuals that are using for whatever reason have to begin to reconcile. And some of us have relationship with substances that are not drugs or alcohol, and it could be food,
exactly.
right? And there's other patterns of addictive behaviors that are happening. But at the end of the day, if it's a mechanism to cope,
Right.
it could be a maladaptive coping mechanism. And we want healthy coping, right? We want individuals not to be numb.
Right.
I always tell my clients, you have to feel to heal.
That's right.
Because if you don't feel,
That's right.
you will not be able to heal, and you will be a numbing person. And when you are numb, and you're not dealing with those issues, your body, right, physically, like you said, wellness,
That's right.
it's
So
going to
important.
show up in your body.
Yes.
It's going to show up somewhere.
Yeah.
And it ages individuals.
Yeah.
And it impacts your ability to
yes.
show up as a father. So I'm just like, listen, you may be a non-custodial father, or you may be a custodial father. You may be a father that's in a home. But if you are a father that engages in that identity thing where it's just like, I have to balance all of these different roles just to be a father, then you're more than likely needing to know how to cope with your fatherhood identity, and you have to find that proper coping strategies. And I wonder oftentimes, can men, really fully know how to cope, or are they having regular conversations about being aware of their emotions? Can you tell me how you feel? I'm good. Good isn't a feeling. Right? So what is your emotional wheel?
Right.
Or are you numbing in places? And I'll just say this one more time, and I'll finish, is we oftentimes see that when you're working, just in my experience with working with men, and sometimes African American men, is that their go-to emotion's anger, but it's a secondary one. Really, they're sad.
Right.
Sometimes they're hurt.
Right.
Sometimes it's depression.
Yeah.
And because that may be a more acceptable manifestation of how you're really feeling, there's not that dealing with those emotions. And so coping with marijuana or other substances is oftentimes how it's done, and avoidance of the emotions is oftentimes pushed aside.
Right. Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
You unloaded a lot there.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I mean, our society as we know it does not accept that, particularly from black men.
Right.
That becomes something else, and it adds to a false narrative.
That's right.
And so coping, however you do it, and through the generations, we're here standing on the shoulders of men who had to just kind of stuff it down.
Yes.
Generations of
Yes.
stuffing down.
That's right.
And so nobody said, well, how are you feeling?
Right.
Nobody cared.
Exactly. That's right.
Nobody cared.
That's right.
And so, and so if you're young and growing up, you learned those things.
Yeah.
This is how you do it. This is how you survive. This is just keep pushing. Feelings. We ain't got time for that. Let's go.
Yeah. Because big boys don't cry. Big boys don't cry. That's what I, hearing mothers say to their sons growing up. Because, suck it up, wipe those tears off, and they're not allowed to show their feelings. And oftentimes men isolate themselves as a result of that, because they don't even come together to talk. And that's something, because women would get together and we would talk about it, but men, they just kind of suck it all up and they don't say anything. That's got to be tough. That's got to be real tough.
Very much.
All right. So Kenny, Mr. Smith, this question is directed to you. The data shows only 24.6% of enrolled fathers were hired. So why is employment still such a big problem for our fathers
So that
with all the interventions that we try to do?
absolutely. So that is a very deep question, and I'm going to go through it quickly. But first, in the work that we do, we had to define what an individual coming to us was. So we didn't get a chance to filter which fathers were sent to us. We had to work with whomever was sent to us. We had over 1,100 fathers that were sent to us that we needed to help with employment. That being said, there were certain things that fathers who came to us for employment that we could not overcome. Mm-hmm. And let me give you some of the extremes. For instance, we had a guy walk into our office that was referred to us for employment who still had a bullet in his chest. Right? We had fathers who were unfortunately in wheelchairs. Now, this has nothing to do other than I think the system was overburdened.
Right.
And there just needed to be a quick check on who was sent to us because some of the fathers were not able to be employed.
Right.
It had nothing to do with our ability to get them connected with
Right.
employment.
Right.
They just couldn't.
Right.
But here's the more systemic issue. And because 90% of these individuals in this study were African American, the job market for African Americans is narrow. It's just a bottom line. And I'm going to quote some statistics that you can look on my website and see. African Americans are 4 times more likely to be hired by an organization that is either A, owned by an African American, or B, the hiring manager is African American. 2 problems, real quick. 1, African Americans only own 3% of all the companies in the United States of America. That's about 960,000 companies. Of those 960,000 companies, only 38,000 of those companies actually hire people. They're all solopreneurs. So only 38,000 African American companies have the ability to hire folks. So right there, you're narrowing the job market.
Yeah.
The second thing is that only 3.6% of all managers in this country identify as being African American. So you can see where the job market is just narrow. So that's just as Keva talked about, that's just another layer in the system. It's just another barrier.
Yes.
And you asked Dr. Ingram about the barriers of substance use. That's just another barrier. So I'm coping because I can't find a job, but now because I'm being drug tested, I still can't get the job.
Right.
So there's other things that were at play there, but the biggest thing is that we just didn't identify that everyone who came to us was really suited to be employed, but they just didn't have the capability. And then the second piece is that there's just a built-in barrier for African American employment. But I will say, I do have a quick story to tell because that's one of the things we work on is really trying to help African American companies be in a position to hire through our incubator program. Yes. And I want to share a success story that I got yesterday because it involves you. Okay. So one of the organizations that we're working with, I won't name them, they actually were awarded a grant through the ABC board, so we thank you. Actually are using those funds to hire a part-time person for their AAA meetings so that when the individuals who come to those AAA meetings are looking for work or looking for other resources, they have a person that can assist them. So that's about,
amazing.
So that has created a job.
That's right.
That money that is put into the community has created a job.
That's right.
And so that's what it's about. You know, it's the system. So that's why.
Yeah, that's excellent, especially for my next question for you, because that's really what it takes, right? So, Mr. Walton, from a policy lens, what are the biggest system level barriers that need to be disrupted to truly support these fathers?
Well, I mean, we all know the barriers that are there, systemic racism and all of those things, and those have been with us since the dawn of this, great country, America. So that's there. And, I say to my team all the time, control what you can control.
Right.
We that's not something we have to keep working at it, but we're not going to solve it tomorrow.
Right.
I think, and I said this word earlier from a policy standpoint, what if we adopted a posture of alignment? So here, Grace Marr is doing this thing. How do all those wonderful systems that we have here in Mecklenburg, and it may be Grace Marr and maybe a number of others, but really start, okay, there's a pool of ready-to-work people who are equipped. How does our workforce programming, how does our housing programming, how does all that align with what's already there?
Right.
And sometimes I think it's easy to, replicate the wheel.
Yeah.
When
Yeah.
you don't have to. And so, if I forget what city we were visiting somewhere, but maybe it was Minneapolis, but they had a policy or a program where their goal was every decision they made was to eliminate poverty. So if it was a new road project, how does that eliminate project, or transit or anything? So I think, again, we are so blessed in Mecklenburg and Charlotte. We have leaders who believe in these things. Right. We have programs that are very real and available, both governmental and nonprofit,
Right.
strong nonprofit community. But how do we align better?
Right.
Because and I've been looking at this. We're looking at this even within our sphere of, we've done the grant program for a number of years and given away millions or invested millions. But how do we do it better and deeper?
Right.
And so I just think if we adopted a posture of alignment, we'd see. It may be slow going. I think we all want to wave the magic wand and make it all happen right away.
Yeah.
That's not reality.
Right.
And these issues are complex. It's very intricate. But again, for me, if we believe in the continued economic well-being of our city and our communities, people have to be well.
Absolutely.
And people have to find a way forward.
That's right.
And if, in fact, we have large segments of our population who can't, that compromises the health of the whole.
Absolutely.
And so, the word disease, people don't dissect it, dis-ease.
Right.
And there's lack of ease in
Right.
big pockets of our population.
Right.
And eventually that impacts kids.
Right.
So it's the vicious circle.
Right. Exactly.
Can I chime in
Yes.
on that? Only because he mentioned that I actually just did a paper. I actually sent it around for some folks to look at, and we defined what the cycle of poverty was. And it starts out with a child being born out of wedlock. That's where it starts. That's where it starts.
Yeah.
And the reason why my wife and I were so big on fatherhood programs is because the fatherhood program or fathers are a leverage point in that cycle of poverty. Right? If you look at the cycle, the child's born out of wedlock, 71% of those children drop out of high school, 70 of them become teen pregnant, right? And then the cycle goes to I can't find a job. Once I can't find a job, now what system takes over? Women usually go into the welfare system, the males go into the justice system. Well, if you put a father in the household, they're telling you 71% of the individuals who drop out of high school come from a fatherless household. So we put the father back in the household, and through our first study, Dr. Ingram, you were very specific. Residential fatherhood did not matter. The same impact could be felt with that father's influence in that child's life, whether he lived in the house or not. So the fatherhood program and the initiative is a poverty cycle breaker.
Yeah.
It's a cycle breaker. And I'll say this last point because I've always talked about these politically charged environments that we're in, both the Brookings Foundation, which is the left-wing think tank, and the Heritage Foundation, who's the right-leaning think tank. Say if any child or anyone does these three things, they're 97% less likely to experience poverty in their house, in their adult life. Graduate high school, don't have a kid out of wedlock, get a full-time job.
Wow.
Fatherhood takes care of two of those things. So I just wanted to mention that because you talked about, because we just created a cycle of poverty, and we literally did a study as how these different systems influence that cycle. And I was glad to hear that you said there are other cities that are looking at that cycle and how do we interrupt and how do we break it.
Absolutely.
Rodney McGill calls it a Leviathan. That's what we say.
Right.
We are
That's a
all
word, yeah.
fighting the Leviathan.
That's right.
So I just wanted to mention that because it's just fortuitous that we actually just created a cycle of poverty and they're actually doing a publication on it. So
Yeah. And I was just in that. That's great. That's great. Just listening to, if we all, like, if a company's awarded $1 million for the to do the road work, and then think, like you said, was that in Tennessee?
I think it was Minneapolis.
Minneapolis, and to think, well, okay, how many people can I employ? You know, because our fathers can't find jobs after they come out of prison sometimes, or just not being, that's the problem. So if everybody looked to find a solution, like if everything that they do is going to lead to a solution, okay, let me think first, how can I help the fathers, or how can I help people, low-income people? How can I get them in jobs? I mean, and I think that's the problem. We talk about this a lot, but, earlier we talked about being able to listen. We need to start listening.
And I think it's important to highlight well fathers.
Absolutely,
Like,
yes.
you want well fathers that are present.
That's right.
In the home, and when the father is well and he's present,
That's right.
emotionally, physically, and also able to be present financially.
Absolutely.
That helps the father with those conflicting barriers that they often have, just by being a father.
Absolutely.
Just by being a father, because in many fields, in human services fields, we oftentimes talk about self-care. We talk about the challenges
Yes, we do.
that people have in particular roles, whether you are a medical doctor and you're oftentimes in emergency rooms and you're seeing all these challenges, or you're watching people in very stressful environments and you may be experiencing secondary trauma. But fatherhood is a very challenging role.
Yes.
And this doesn't mean that I'm degrading or taking away of the value
Absolutely.
of the mother. It's just
right.
highlighting
Right.
the value of the father. And so ensuring that role is highlighted as a role that could be strenuous sometimes, and ensuring that they have resources and wellness resources so that fathers can lead change in our country.
Absolutely. That was great. So, Dr. Ingram, what does the research suggest we must stop doing when it comes to engaging fathers in substance use or employment programs?
I think we can kind of reiterate what we've been saying, like throughout this conversation, is recognizing our own judgment, reasoning, bias, our own perceptions, misconceptions, conceptions, and learn how to be what I like to call reflective practitioners.
That's right.
And you don't have to be in a career to be a reflective practitioner. You can just be a human.
That's it.
Okay? And I have been saying this to my students. I've been saying this in the community with my community partners. Like, if we learn how to be better humans,
That's it. That's it.
if we genuinely learn how to be better humans, we'll see a better humanistic society.
Absolutely.
Right? And just understanding the power of stories and storytelling and what we're doing here. When we talk about alignment, we can better understand how to align because we did a good job of just listening to what is being said. And the better alignment happens when we know how to be really good listeners. And lastly, there's power in storytelling. There's power in listening. That's why I love listening sessions. What happens in the brain, it's called neurocoupling. And that's how you can collectively engage. You can engage in greater bonding and empathy and understanding and greater, deeper collaboration when you are able to hear each other's stories.
Yeah.
And so when you become a practitioner, a human reflective practitioner that knows how to be a good listener, then we can become better, greater collaborators. Then we can align intentionally for the work that we do in the future. And so I'm hoping that what happens is this study becomes a best practice model of how do we engage,
Right.
and how do we disengage with judgments, bias, what we think, but re-engage with the community with how we become reflective listeners.
That's
make
awesome.
one comment on
Yes,
something
that's
she
awesome.
said.
Absolutely.
She gave the scientific connection with stories, but I work with a guy, Robert Johnson, and he has a partner, Dave Newell, and he always says, Kenny, the shortest distance between two people is a story. So she just gave me the scientific.
Yes.
I got to let Dave
Yes.
know that there's a
There's
science
science
behind it.
behind
Because he would
it.
always say that. I'd be
Yes.
like, okay, but now there's science behind
Yeah,
it. So
makes a lot of sense.
It
Makes a
brings
lot of
down
sense.
everybody can find commonality there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
that we really aren't that different.
That's, oh my goodness.
There are
Just have a
elements,
conversation.
just a conversation,
Just a
but
conversation.
so much gets in between us, right?
Yeah,
That
yeah.
you know we fail to hear each other, and not just listen, but truly hear.
Yeah, absolutely. That was good. All right, Kenneth. What?
Kenneth now?
Yeah,
Okay.
I just, because I'm trying to switch in my mind. What do I call him? Forget it. Kenny, how about that? I'm just going to call you Kenny. Just
Yes.
What programmatic shifts have you made or considering as a result of this report?
There's one big one. It just was a glaring thing that stood out. We have to create places where fathers can come to and just be together. And I thought about this. We have so many different groups of men who gather. To Keva's point, we don't need to recreate the wheel.
No.
How do we get our fathers engaged in those groups? I may not be able to become a part of the Divine Nine or the 100 Black Men because
Right.
But there are church groups out there who have father programs.
Yeah.
There's so many groups. So my biggest goal is going to be, how do we connect our fathers to some of these other support groups? Because that's what they screamed.
They asked for it.
They
That's
did.
right.
They screamed it.
Yeah.
Where do I go when I need to talk to someone?
Yeah.
And all of our groups are so membership driven.
Yeah.
How do we say, hey, can you just, I'm just a man who is going through some
That's it.
stuff with my kids.
Yeah.
Can I come in and just download
Yeah.
and have some support from you guys?
Yeah.
That's my challenge. How do I break that
Yeah.
barrier down? Because I don't want to create another group. There are groups out there. How do I get my folks connected to these groups?
Yeah.
Oh, that's good.
It's almost like the business incubator, having all the people, that need help growing and scaling their businesses. What if we had a place just for fathers that they can come and get the resources that they need, get referrals out to whatever they need. I mean, I think that is something, that's a space for them that they'll know I'll always have some place to go, and it can form relationships and
And it
form
could be
community.
the alignment.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Talking about.
Absolutely.
Oh wow.
So this last question is to you, Mr. Walton. How does this study shape how you think about future funding priorities or partnerships?
Yeah, that's well. Again, back to research. So one of the things we're in the process of doing now is that we're taking a step back and saying, when the organization was founded 76 years ago, we came out of the chute investing in substance misuse education. We co-founded what is now Anuvia in the 50s. We started the grants in the 90s or something like that. So what's next? And so we're in the process of investigating what next looks like. And again, it may not look like this. And again, I'm clear, we're not the program deliverers, we're the catalysts. We
Right.
want to invest in folks who can go out there and touch people where they are and create kind of action like this research will do. So that's going to be a powerful piece of work that we probably won't get into until FY26, which is coming up July quick. And it may look very different from now. And listening to this conversation, these are some of the inputs
Right.
that might help shape some of that, because I would imagine some of that is listening to our grantees and what they're finding and helping them be successful in what they're doing. But I will say the thing that is important to me is continuing the wellness aspect, and that it isn't a single source.
Yeah.
The substance misuse is tied to so many other issues.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, one of the things I noticed when I came on is I looked at it like a pie. We had all these great grassroots nonprofit doing all this great work, touching people. But what's the umbrella?
That part.
What's the think tank behind it? What's the alignment
Right.
of, you know, substance abuse for underage, substance abuse for mothers?
Yeah, absolutely.
So great, continue to do your great in your lane, but how is that lane, how is all that tied together?
Right.
So I think this work, and that's some of the thinking we're about looking at as we speak. And I can't. This conversation's got me. But Kenny, him.
Yeah.
He always
answer to
anything,
Yeah,
right?
exactly,
You know, him always gets me thinking about these
Right,
things
right.
because again, I say it again.
Yeah.
We are so blessed in Charlotte, Mecklenburg.
Yeah.
We have great leaders, civic and political, who think about this stuff and care about
Yeah.
this stuff and invest in this stuff.
Absolutely.
Now it's just, I use puzzles a lot as an analogy because if you do a jigsaw puzzle, it's in all these pieces. There's a picture, but you got to start piece by piece.
Absolutely.
And how do you link those pieces
Absolutely.
together? And so when I think about community, that's kind of how I see it. So
Yeah. Well, thank you guys. That was fantastic. I loved what you said about just, you know, we have to stay thinking.
Yeah.
You know,
Constantly.
yeah.
Yep.
You know, we don't just stop at one solution,
Yep.
right? Because there's so many different ways to solve a problem, and we have to keep this discussion going, right? And not just talk about it, but we got to be about it,
Well,
right?
Mr. Smith.
Right.
Him, I told you, don't answer to anything.
But you know what strikes me about this, and you said it replicating, you know, it's almost as like, so we had a grant program. I call it a grant program in a box.
Yeah.
And we work with a foundation that it has the outcomes, everything you need. If you've never administered a grant, it's all inclusive. And we have funded maybe 15 or 20 of those to do that. So could your Fatherhood Forum be in a box, so to speak.
Exactly.
The toolkit. Here's
Yes.
the toolkit on how. So it's a church men's group. It's a fraternal organization. It's a police organization.
That's right.
And so that anybody has the tools to be able to implement one of these. And here's how you go about it. Here's what the funding looks like, and so forth and so on. So I told him not to invite me over here.
No, that's fantastic right there.
But I love that. I mean, you know, because I'm thinking of my wife's hometown and close to that pastor and small town. But that little church is the center of everything. And he has got a lot of non-custodial fathers that are coming to him. So he and his congregation would appreciate having some guidance on how to do this.
Absolutely.
Great.
That's powerful.
So, in closing, if you guys could say one thing to the policymakers and the funders, what would that one thing be? And start with you.
You know, my word is alignment.
Yeah.
You know, that's fine. The alignment, I'll stop right there. One word.
It doesn't have to be one word. It doesn't have to be one word.
Well, I did a plug for GraceMart because the story you told earlier, you know, the stereotypes or the misperceptions out there, what GraceMart does is de-risk that for an employer and a community.
That's good.
Yep.
Yeah, that's right.
Absolutely.
And so you make that person much more employable. And that creates alignment.
Excellent. Yeah.
Yes. Oh my gosh, that's so powerful. And I would aligned, and I'm just being a bridge to alignment in this moment. Final word would be to policymakers, funders, would be make the alignment and bridge happen. And be that bridge that allows that to happen for organizations that are trusted vessels and can become a safe place for people to get well. Because not every place is a safe place to get well. But Grace Mar historically has been a place for fathers to come and get well. They're not just coming for work, but they're leaving out well. They're not just coming to get an opportunity, but they're coming to a place where they can get well. And then they're able to go back to their families and be well. And so I really want to encourage those that would like to find ways to support or be a bridge for Grace Mar, shouting them out for their work. And I'm just honored to have been partnering with you all for the past 3 years. This is like my family. I don't play about them, right? Yes, but that's what alignment and partnership is, because when you do not see each other as competition, but as supportive mechanisms, it makes the alignment more effective.
That's it.
Right? And so because the mission is common, so we could have unity, community. So thank you for being such a great community partner.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Well,
I love it.
I would just say to policymakers and funders, bring everyone in the room. Because typically the funder is that strategic arm. They want an outcome. What they fail to do, and I see it, and this is just not in government or social service space. This is in corporate too. I spent 20 years there. We oftentimes fail to bring the tactical people and the practical people into the room, right? I want to do this. Great. Well, how are you going to implement that? Then what you want to implement, is it even practical? Can we even do it?
Yes.
And that's the thing that always bothers me. I see these groups get together, these think tanks, and I say, you're going to get the same result because you don't have everyone in the room.
That's right.
I don't need to be in the room, but the person who's definitely going to be the person who's going to be on the end of what you're producing, they need to be there.
Need to be in the room.
And then you need to know those that labor among you?
Yeah,
That's
right.
it. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
What a concept, right? What a concept.
That's what I push. That's what I always preach.
Yeah.
Get everyone in the room.
Yeah.
That part.
Just get everyone in the room.
We have what we need.
Yeah.
We have
Yeah.
So that's what I'll close with.
This was a fantastic conversation, great dialogue. This research, Dr. Ingram.
Yes.
Absolutely
Give it up to Dr.
amazing.
Ingram.
We just want to, we want to thank you. And I love what you said about when people are in alignment, working together, knowing that, it's not, me, or, but it's us, right? And I think that's a mindset that we need to leave with, because if we adopt that mindset, then we are truly working for the people, right?
part.
So again, thank you guys for coming out, for sharing your time. Kenny, if somebody wanted to get a hold of this research, what would you suggest that they do?
Oh, another plug. Y'all are just throwing me alley-oops today. All right, so we with the blessings of Mr. Walton, his staff, and his team at the ABC board, I think they've given us permission now to make it available. So there'll be a link on our website, and Dr. Ingram has given her blessings because she gave it to us. So you can go to www.gracemar.org. There's a publications link up there. It will be up there today by 5:00, where you can actually view the whole study.
Awesome.
Wonderful,
Yay.
wonderful.
That's awesome. And I know we have more sessions to dissect.
Yes.
Right? So guys, this is going to be the first of many, first of 4. So those that are listening, join us, maybe subscribe so you can get the notifications when we're coming on. But this is where the conversation is. I think we all need to just get involved, right? Take care. We're all out. We're done.
All right.
We're done.